The day that me and Rasheed decided that we were going to do the staycation, that entire week I was just so happy and excited. I was at work trying to plan activities, also coming home asking him what he liked, what he didn't like, just so I could make sure that that weekend in particular was going to be something special and ultimately something fun for the both of us. I think at this time, me and him were just so caught up in the four walls of our apartment that, the small arguments, me finding out stuff, him apologizing and kind of repeating it, was creating this tension in the house. And I really felt like we needed some fresh air and just to try to get on one accord if we're quote unquote dating each other. So when that weekend came, I had everything planned out. I booked us a couples massage. We did a virtual VR experience, which was super fun. I had never done that before. I got us a nice hotel downtown. We went to a really nice restaurant. So the whole weekend was already planned, and those are the activities that we ended up doing. Now, prior to us going on the staycation, that morning, something was a little off. I couldn't really tell what was off, but backstory, that entire week I had started to text some of my old flings and old people I had messed with in the past, just because I was in this space where I felt like if you're going to continue to do these things to me, I want to do it, but that wasn't my character. So I always felt bad responding or texting or leading these people on to make them think that, hey, I'm still interested or we still have the same connection like we did before, because at that point we did not have the connection, because I was trying to end it to make things right and to get everything together with Rasheed while we were trying to work on a relationship and while he was living with me. So it was maybe the night before or maybe 2 nights before. I'm not really sure when it happened, but he did eventually go through my phone. At the time, I didn't know it. So that morning when we're about to leave, I had got up, got my hair done and a few other things, and was just asking him, are you excited? But, his responses were kind of dry. And so I'm just like, okay, maybe he's just not, fully up or whatever. So while we're laying in the bed and I'm talking to him, he brings up, hey, I think I want to change my name on all of my social media platforms. And I was like, okay, do it. That sounds, like a rebrand, or you want to, do something new for yourself. So just do it. But then he goes into the names that he wants to choose, and he throws a little bit out there, but then he mentions 2 names in particular. Now, these 2 names were names of people that were in my phone, but at the time, I'm not that smart to think of things and get it right away when they're happening in the moment. So when I heard the 2 names, I was like, oh, that's interesting. Why these particular names? And these names were close enough to his real name to where I thought, okay, maybe this is just not a coincidence and you really do want to change your social media platform name to these names, or the possibility of changing them to these names. So he kept asking me, how do you feel about these names? Do you like them? And I explained to him that, if this was something that he really wanted to do, then do it. But in the back of my mind, I kind of knew already that he had went through my phone. I just didn't want to say anything to blow up my spot, especially with me already going ahead and planning this weekend for us. Because again, I was super excited and happy just for us to pretty much be going on our first date, let alone a staycation in the city. Like it was just going to be a fun weekend for me. So we ended up packing our bags. We get downtown. We start doing the activities and all that good stuff. Once we were finished with that and we were heading to dinner, it was a portion where we were walking back to the hotel and he starts to bring up the names again. And I said, well, did you go through my phone? Because at this point you keep bringing it up and I feel like you went through my phone. And he finally told me that he went through my phone. And so I asked him, how did that feel, or how did that make him feel going through my phone and seeing that? And Rasheed, now that I'm understanding what kind of person he is emotionally unavailable. And I think that comes from past traumas that he never spoke to with me about, or just internal things that he had going on with himself. So he was like, he really didn't care, but at the same time, why do all the things that I was doing to him if I'm going to be doing the same thing? In my defense, I didn't want to feel like I was being crazy or, just stupid because I was allowing him to already start these small behaviors and I was just already dealing with them. So to make me feel better about the situation, I felt like that's what I needed to do. But like I said before, I didn't really feel good about it because, again, that's not my character. When I am in a relationship and when I really like and love somebody, that is the only person that I want to be with. And that is the only person that I'm trying to get to know. I feel like when you're dating people and you try to date multiple people or trying to get to know multiple personalities and things like that, it's like water and oil. The situations will never mix because you're going to have so many people with so many feelings everywhere that you're going to end up getting lost in translation too. So that's why I choose to be the way that I am when I am dating one person. So we had the conversation and we ended up at dinner, and the conversation carried into dinner. And at this point, I was looking for reassurance again that he wanted to be with me and just wanted to know what were we doing. Because at this point, I'm continuing to find all the same things that we had talked about before. And this was he had moved in August. This was already going into October. And all of that had already happened from August to October. So while we're at the dinner table, he reassured me again that he loved me, that he wanted to be in the relationship, but he did bring up the simple fact that I had been going through his phone and that I was bringing up all the situations and issues that I had brought up in, the past. And so the part of manipulation for the situation or the conversation at dinner that I feel like was manipulation because he turned it on to me. Now, a narcissist, when they are being called out on certain things, they will try to deflect the situation as much as they can to put it on you to make it seem like you're the reason why all of this stuff is happening. And so while doing that, he mentioned to me that going through his phone was an invasion of his privacy and that I shouldn't be doing that to begin with. And while I'm at the table, because we're having this conversation about reassurance and where we're going with our relationship, I thought to myself, I kind of didn't like him going through my phone. But at the end of the day, I had never done anything up until that point to where you would have even needed to go through my phone. Again, I had got off all the dating apps. I was no longer talking to anybody. I was fully trying to commit myself to our situation. But in that moment, I also felt like, you know what? He's right. By me going through his phone, that is an invasion of privacy. So maybe I shouldn't do that anymore. And we left it at that. We talked about the relationship. And to be quite honest, the rest of our night was amazing. I had brought out my camera. We went around the meatpacking district. I took photos of him because the one thing that I will say about him, he dresses his ass off and he loves to take pictures. And I wanted to be the girl that could just do anything I could for him at that time that brought him joy and that brought him, happiness. So we ended the night going to a couple bars, taking pictures, and then we just went back to the hotel and just had a great night. So once that whole night and the weekend had ended, I think we stayed at the hotel maybe a day or two. We came back to the house and, we continued the good vibes, watching movies, talking to each other, and just really keeping up the effort. And to be quite honest, during our whole time being together, I think that time after that staycation, maybe those next 1 or 2 weeks was probably the best weeks that we had not gotten into anything. I did not go through the phone. We were not arguing. We were literally making what I thought was progress. Now, at this time, I was starting to bring my friends into the situation. I have 2 best friends in Texas. Well, I have a bunch of best friends because I don't want nobody coming for me. But 2 main friends that I was conversating with on a daily basis. And I started to let them know what the situation was and what was going on between me and Rasheed in the household. Now, any friend is always going to be honest with you. And sometimes the honesty and the truth hurts, But I will say one of my best friends, Ashley, she kind of always knew that Rasheed was not the person for me. When I started to tell her some of the things that was happening, she used to always say like, girl, I think he's using you. And I'm like, well, no, he has money. He could easily move out. I don't think that he's using me. And, just explaining to them the situation, that feedback, it was almost like it was helpful, but it was also hurting me at the same time because yes, these are the things that I needed to hear because I felt like they were being honest and they had my best interest at heart. But at the same time, I'm slowly already entering into a delusional stage of what the fantasy was without really knowing what the reality was of my situation. So I didn't really want to hear all of the negative because I'm like, you know what? I know him a little bit better than y'all. I do think that he will change and that things will get better. But I thank them always for the insight. But even down to some of my other friends, they always just said something negative about him. And maybe, like I said, maybe I should have taken more heed to what they were saying at the time. But again, when you're blinded by love, I didn't see anything else. I just wanted somebody to hear me, somebody to give me feedback, and then just find different ways to make the situation work. But I will never forget one of my good friends here. I don't want to say her name, but I showed her a picture of him. And the one thing she told me that always stood out to me was he looks very handsome, but he has a demonic look to him. And I was showing her some of his pictures and she was like, yeah, girl, he has a demonic look to him. He looks like he has something that's inside of him, like not necessarily an evil spirit, but just something that wasn't right about him. And, and like I said, all the things that I was listening to, I would listen to it, but kind of low key was going in one ear and out the other, but still in some small part of my brain, I was retaining what they were telling me because I if this is somebody I'm interested in and I'm having conversations with people about him, I did listen to some of the stuff and retain some of the information. But now thinking back on it, I should have listened more because he definitely has a lot of baggage. He had a lot of trauma, and your friends are always going to be able to see what you don't see while you're in the relationship, even family or just people that know about the situation and have a little bit more insight. So that was starting not necessarily at this particular time to create a disconnect between me and my friends, but that was the foundation, or the start, I should say, of the disconnect that would later come on between me and my friends, where we would actually ultimately get into it behind me defending Rasheed. So I would say maybe after those 2 weeks after our staycation, my curiosity just started to run. It started to run and it was just building up because I think for me at this particular time, going through the phone was starting to become like a sick game to me. I could not wait for him to go to sleep because I knew at that point it would be time for me to go through the phone to find out anything extra and to just process that information because at this point I honestly did not know what he was capable of or who I was living with. So with that curiosity in the back of my mind, I just kept thinking about him saying, that's an invasion of my privacy. And I also didn't want him going through my phone. But again, I didn't have anything in my phone to hide. So do as you please. It was one particular night. We were laying in the bedroom and I had already pretty much seen everything that I had wanted to see, but again, curiosity killed the cat, so he fell asleep with his phone in his hand, and it was on. So I'm thinking to myself in the bed, I'm like, okay, girl, like, do you want to do this again? Like, do you want to go through it? And to be quite honest, this whole relationship and the demise of me as a person, the relationship, and just where me and him are right now was all because I went through the phone. And I've always been led with my intuition, but I had never been able to go through any of my boyfriend's phones, let alone didn't need to, because either we ended on mutual terms where we both decided we didn't want to be together anymore, or the truth eventually came out in the light. So I never needed to go through the phone. But with him living here with me and us again having unprotected sex and building that connection and having that bond with each other, because I thought you were my friend first before anything else, it just made sense for me again to try to figure out who he was and to see if he was continuing to lie to me and so on and so forth. So we're in the bed. I ended up grabbing the phone. Everything was the same. I really didn't find anything new. He still had maybe one or two dating apps, not as many as he did before, because again, prior to all of this, he told me that, you know, him being bored and not having anything to do, that was how he spent his free time. So I wasn't really shocked by that. The messages were still the same. And so I found the app X, which is the old Twitter app. And I had never thought to go through that app before, because I'm just like, you know what? He's probably just on there like any other body on Twitter, or X, I should say. But the one thing that clicked in my head was this app is now low-key like Pornhub. Or, you know, it's just not what it used to be, where you could tweet about TV shows and celebrities and pop culture and things like that. It's just not the same anymore. Let's just be honest. So I thought to myself, I'm like, okay, girl, just kind of go through it. Went through it, and I don't personally have a Twitter account, but I used to, so I know where things are, and I know that you can direct message people. And so I head to the messages, and sure enough, there's messages in the phone. Now, they were from regular women, but then I started to scroll down a little bit more, and I see this one particular girl. Now, me being trans, regardless if somebody looks super well put together or their transition has just blossomed to where they fully look like a cisgendered woman, I am always going to be able to tell, if not right away, a little bit more as I scroll or hear their voice or whatever, to know that they are trans. And before I even got with Rasheed, when me and him used to just mess around when we were friends with benefits, I had always asked him, have you been with a trans woman before? And he told me that he had, and that it was just sex, whatever, and that was it. And I said, well, do you have an interest in trans women? He was like, no, I think outside of you, I would not date anybody that's trans again, or even mess around with somebody that was trans. So I said, okay, cool. But the messages that I was finding in this Twitter account, the girl was definitely trans. And the one thing that really stuck with me and shocked me was, in this message, he's telling the girl not necessarily what our physical address was, but the street that we lived on and where it was near. And so I just took a deep breath, because I'm like, it's one thing to worry about cisgendered women, and I'm okay with like low-key competing with these women, because at that point, that's what I was doing. I was choosing to stay and allowing him to do that part. But now that I see that you're adding another group of women to it, and not only that, you're telling them the area that we live in, now my anxiety is going through the roof. Because why would you be telling this girl where we live and you have no interest in her, or you say that you're bored? Because now that's taking it to the next level. And so after that, I just closed the phone. I obviously was sad. I obviously was getting my feelings hurt again. And I just looked at him, because how can you sleep so peacefully and doing all this stuff and knowing that I'm right next to you and we continue to have these conversations? Because at this point, I'm confused as hell. And this is where the up and down, up and down, up and down roller coaster started to happen within our relationship. So the next morning came. I didn't mention it to him at the time, because at this time I was already working at the hospital. So my shifts were 9 to 9. So that was 12 hours that I would be at the hospital. But what happened was I started to get anxiety, because I did not want him to bring anybody into our home, especially on his days off, while I'm at work. So I didn't have any cameras in the house, and I just felt like I'm too grown for that. Like, I'm not going that deep into it to where I need to get cameras to put in my house, but it was just always on the back of my mind while I was at work, and it was starting to affect me a little bit because I couldn't really think straight. But it wasn't as bad as my anxiety would have gotten later on down the line. So I'm continuing to work that day, just thinking about it, and I'm like, you know, I'm one of those trans people who already have like body dysmorphia, or, you know, I feel like I want to look a certain type of way because I have all these morals and values of, you know, wanting to be a wife, wanting to have kids, wanting a husband. And I just feel like if I don't look a certain way, these things will never come to me. So I was already starting to like, not necessarily compare myself to the women that I was seeing, but I started to get a little bit more infatuated with the women that I was coming across, especially now that he has been in communication with another trans person. So down to the T to what these women's Instagrams looked like, the aesthetic, what their body type was. And mind you, this is all a lot for my brain to take in because these women ranged from different ages, from 25 to maybe 50, from different body types, from different nationalities. So I was all over the place trying to figure out what it is about all of these women that he likes, and he has me right here, and I keep going through the same thing. Like, he was not ready for a relationship, and I always told him, if you think I'm pressuring you for one, I'm not. Yes, my feelings will be hurt because I've already gotten attached to you and I love you, but if you think that you don't want to be with me and you just want to be friends, yes, it's going to be hard to adjust to that, but I would rather you be 100% honest with me than to lie to me and to make me feel like I'm on this pedestal when I'm not. And that's exactly what he was doing. In the midst of all of this happening, Rasheed actually ended up receiving a letter in the mail, and him and his previous roommates were all being summoned to court by the landlord from the previous guy that I was dating that I mentioned before, from running off from the rent. Now, I took the opportunity to support him and be with him during this time because Rasheed was the kind of person who did not really know how to handle real life human situations. So I took it upon myself. I took off from work, not only to support him, but to also show him the type of girlfriend I could be, and also to low-key show him my value, that I was there for him whenever he needed me to be there. So after we went to court and handled that situation, later on that night, I kind of had dozed off to sleep when we were in the bed, but I woke up to a bright light. Now, with this bright light being on, I just kind of opened up my eye, not really fully, but just squinting to see what it was. And Rasheed was in the bed. And to me, this is where it just started to get more weird for me, as far as him being the person that I'm laying next to. What I seen was he was on a dating app and he was literally just swiping, not even really looking at the women or the description or to even see if the person he was swiping on would even have the qualities or anything in common with him to, you know, to be a match. But again, why are you doing this? And we're working on our relationship. So I then seen him switch over to Instagram, and you know how you have the explore pages and things like that. He was going through the explore pages, looking at different women, and he was going to like private profiles. And what he was doing was, if the profile was like private, he would expand the picture a little bit just to see if he liked what he saw. And if he did, he was starting to follow them. And so in my mind, I'm just like, okay, now I really know what and who I'm dealing with in this situation. So he eventually fell asleep, but the phone was on. I didn't even bother to go through the phone at this point because I'm just starting to notice that this is not just a pattern, or this is just not you doing this out of boredom. This is a characteristic for you. And I just really didn't understand, again, why he was doing this, but I've always said it. I feel like it started from his childhood. When his mother passed away, there was probably a longing for a female presence in his life that he needed, to show that unconditional love and to feel nurtured, and just to have somebody take you under their wing that is a mother or a woman figure, to show you certain things in life that only, mothers can do, or women can do with that type of title. I didn't even mention it to him that I went through this thing with him that night before, because we had a routine put in place, and I want to take a break from the story to kind of talk about the routine a little bit, and how all of this was starting to affect me both mentally and physically. So I started to become very sleep deprived. I was not able to sleep at night because my anxiety was very high and my mind was always racing. And I just knew that that was really the only time I was able to investigate or do anything that I wanted to do as far as the phone was concerned, to find out what he was doing behind my back. There was such a adrenaline rush and also just excitement, low-key, that I got from being able to get it and find out more stuff that he was not going to tell me. So with me being sleep deprived, me and him both worked very early on most days of the week. But I always wanted to make sure that I was taking care of him, honestly, before I took care of myself. So I would always ask him, like, hey, do you want breakfast? Whether it was big or small, it could have been eggs and bacon and pancakes, or anything down to like a fruit smoothie if he was running for time, or pressed for time, I should say. Then I would have to get myself together, head to work, do that 12-hour shift at the hospital, dealing with patients, the doctor, my staff, my personal problems, because at work at this point, I could not think about anything else but trying to make the situation right, and to also change him as a person. And I think that is where I got everything wrong, because we cannot change anybody. And that's where the downfall of me started to really happen, because I was thinking of so many ways to change things that I had no control over. Then to come home, cook dinner, and if anybody knows me, I am cooking like big meals, especially if it's, for my man, if he's been working all day and doing whatever at work, especially if the job was like very challenging, or it was a lot of like heavy lifting, which he does at his job. I'm making like baked chicken, fish, salmon, oxtails, because he was Jamaican. So I really wanted to cater to him in that way. Again, trying to show him my value and trying to show him that I am different from all of these women that he's looking for something in, right? Then to clean the house. He really didn't help me around the house. He really didn't help me clean. And if he did, his type of cleaning was just washing the dishes and putting them away. And I can probably count on one hand with maybe 2 or 3 fingers how many times he did that. So from me cleaning the kitchen, the bathroom, our bedroom, the living room, just to take a shower and stay up again all night to go through the phone was my routine. And like I said, this is where I started to get physically and mentally exhausted and drained, because, like I said, I really didn't know anything else to do but to keep finding out who he was and peeling back those layers of him as a person. So with all of that being said, the next couple of weeks just became more and more apparent that he was playing a game with me. He was playing a game with me, and to be honest, I was allowing him to play this game with me because, like I said, when you're deep in love like that and you're blindsided, it's very hard to remove yourself from the situation, especially when you have now created a soul tie with this person. So I was starting to get messages from some of my friends and close people that I knew that had been to my house, that had met Rasheed before, telling me that they had seen him on the dating apps, I even had one of my close friends tell me that Rasheed had matched with her cousin, and she screenshotted everything to me and showed me the messages of them talking as well. And that's super embarrassing, and I felt embarrassed. So I had another conversation with him, and mind you, at this point, I'm almost like hysterically crying in this man's face and telling him my problems and telling him what the issues that I'm having with him are with doing all of this stuff to me. This man would look at me, he would tell me that he was sorry, that he loved me, and that he wouldn't do it again. That was always the repeated response in these situations. And for me, like I said, I do have abandonment issues, and I did not want to lose Rasheed. So again, in the back of my mind, I thought, you know, if I did certain things or if I was quiet about certain stuff, that he wouldn't leave me and that he would stay. Now, I want to talk about a few main characters in this story because, again, there was so many women that I had seen, but there are a few that really stood out to me. Now, at this time, he was texting a girl named Maya. Now, I don't know Maya personally, but we do have mutual friends, and I have seen her around in New York before. And I'm just going to assume that him and Maya met at his job. He does work at a steakhouse. And eventually I would see a video of him slicing meat for this girl. And I'm sure that is how the connection started. So in these text messages, you know, he's telling her, you know, you and your friends should pull up to my job. I can get y'all a discount, you know, come eat, all this good stuff, right? And I'm reading all of these messages. And if you remember when I told y'all in part 1 that Rasheed had went away and didn't speak to me for about 2 months. Well, in some of these threads of messages, you know, they're talking about kids and if they ever, you know, had gotten anybody pregnant. And so the girl was pretty much saying like, yeah, you know, I had got pregnant before, but I had a miscarriage. And as I'm reading more into it, Rasheed is telling her that he also had got somebody pregnant not too long ago, but the girl ended up having a miscarriage. And so I just sat there and I thought about it, and I'm like, the girl that had mentioned to him that she had taken care of something, and, you know, she was in a lot of pain, and his response was, I'm sorry you feel that way, and he didn't respond back to her. It all clicked to me that that was the girl that you had got pregnant during the 2 months and that time that you were not speaking to me. And so my heart just started sinking even more because I'm like, how are you able to tell these random women all of this important information about you, but I'm here being super vulnerable with you, telling you about my childhood, telling you about my life, and really opening up to you so that way you can understand me and the way that I am and how I'm maneuvering in this relationship with you. But then you give a random person all of this personal information who honestly could care less about you. Because eventually she was able to see what kind of person he was. They ended up going on a date. And I found this out because one day I was coming back home from my doctor's appointment and his phone was open and I went through it. And they had planned a whole date. He was telling her the days that he was off. They had planned the location and everything. So while he was sleeping on the couch, I just got really raged and I just shouted out, get up, like get up. And you know, I tried to play it off as if I was just telling him to get up, like jokingly. And I ended up telling him, like, you've been asleep all day, like, get up, like, the day is still young, like, let's go do something. But I guess my tone had really shocked him, and he knew that something else was wrong. So I played it off for about maybe 30 minutes or an hour until I eventually told him, like, why are you doing this to me? Like, why are you doing this to me? Because if you do not want to be with me, I'm not going to keep telling you that over and over and over again. And I just started crying in front of him. And what he did was he came up to me, he hugged me, like, and he wouldn't let go of me. And he was just telling me, like, you know what, Nolani, you're right. I really do see that you love me and that you care about me. I'm going to start, you know, getting off all the apps completely because I've made up my mind that I want to be with you. The simple fact that I had already heard this multiple times, but again, in my mind, I always felt like at some point he was going to change. I just accepted it and I took it for what it was. So shortly after that, I was starting to notice a slight difference in him going into the next couple of days, into the weeks. He was texting me more often. He was asking me, was I okay? He was asking me what was for dinner. Should we go out somewhere? Like really putting his best foot forward. So I was like, okay, wait a minute. This actually might be a change. And he did that continuously for a little minute. So at this point, I was like, okay, maybe I don't need to go through the phone anymore. Things were going good around the house. And one day I was talking to one of my friends and she was telling me about this update on iPhone. It was with the new update, and I'm so slow about these updates because it always catches me when it's time for an update, when I really need to use my phone or either my phone is dying. So I am probably like one of the last people to update my phone when there is a new update out. And she was like, yeah, girl, it's like this new feature where you could delete the text messages in the phone. But if you go to the top, you can see recently deleted messages. And I was like, oh, okay, girl. Like, you know, that's cool. But in my mind, here I go again. I'm like, okay. So maybe a couple days after she had told me that, me and Rasheed were in the bed again and he left his phone on again. So I used it to my advantage. I went through the phone and I went to the recently deleted messages. And anytime you are signing up for a dating app, it's always going to give you like this little code or this pin to sign into the app or to verify the phone number or whatever the case is. But it always comes from like a very small digit number like 4567 or 1234 as an example. So as I'm going through the recently deleted messages, I'm like looking to see that he was getting these notifications from these dating apps, and very recently, as of like that same day before, verifying for him to get on the dating apps. But then as I'm looking through the phone, there's no dating apps in sight. No dating apps in sight. And I go through the recently deleted messages some more, and I found the girl Maya again. Him and that girl Maya had actually went on a date. Actually went on a whole complete date, and he was like, you know, send me the pictures of us from our date. And when she sent it to him, I was able to see all the pictures. He was hugged up with this girl in a mirror, taking a picture like they were literally a couple for one night only. And at this point, I'm really just starting to get my feelings hurt and just to become very like all over the place, honestly, all over the place. And so I removed myself from the room and I came to the living room just to cool off. Because I'm like, there is no way, girl, that you are putting up with this right in front of your face and you're not making any moves. I don't know what it was. I felt like I was just confined and stuck to where I couldn't make any decisions or make any moves to really get him out of my house or to end that relationship. And that's why I tell people trauma bonds, and when you are having sex with somebody, that energy transfer is a real thing. It's a real thing, because every time we were having sex, I always felt like he was transferring stuff to me, you know? And so he eventually woke up in the middle of the night and he seen that I was in the living room just crying. And when he came in here, I told him, don't come near me. Like, do not come near me right now. And he was like, oh, you went through my phone again. And I said, yeah. But then I also just brought up this situation like, why are you going out on dates with people, then coming and laying next to me, kissing on me, having sex with me, and still continuing to do all of these things? And so I told him, I said, well, you know, I just need some time to think, because at this point, this is not working out for us. And that kind of made him more frustrated and mad because he's like, why do you keep going through my phone? And if you want me to leave, then I'll fine. I'll just leave tomorrow. Like, I'm going to pack my bags and I'll leave tomorrow. When I heard him say that, something clicked in my head like, girl, you cannot lose another person that you care about and that you love again in your life. So I jumped up off the couch and I just said, I just want you to change. I just want you to change. I'm not asking you to leave. But he was like, no, back up from me. Don't touch me. And this was really starting to turn into a huge argument for us in the house. And so I'm telling him, like, just calm down. Like, I'm just asking you to stop doing this to me. And that's all I'm asking. I'm not kicking you out. I'm not telling you that you have to leave. But in my mind, now thinking about it, I think these were the type of things that he was doing to get that type of reaction out of me, and to also reassure himself that he was still having a roof over his head. And in some weird way, I honestly think these confrontations or these arguments was fueling him as a narcissist. Because now that I realize, no matter what you say or no matter what you do to a narcissist, they are always going to be the same person, the same exact person. So we ended up cooling off that night and we both went to bed. And the next day, I was just in awe. I was at work and, you know, I had a lot of tasks to do at work, but like, I just could not even focus. I just could not focus because now I realized what he was doing. When you were at home with me, you were taking these apps off of your phone because you knew at this point I was being a detective and going through your phone. But then when you would get to work, you would get back on them. You would be texting people and trying to delete the messages. But now that I found out that I could go back into the recently deleted messages, that's how all of this came up. Because had I not heard that from my homegirl or had not seen anything, I would have thought everything was still peaches and cream. At this time is when I think I started to kind of experience my first stages of depression. And I want to say I entered into this very sad era where everything was just starting to become very sad for me. It was just all too much for me to take in. And with me being sleep deprived, my anxiety high, being physically and mentally exhausted, I started to feel very numb and desensitized to a lot of the stuff that I would find after this point. And, you know, I just really wish I could explain to y'all why I stayed in it for so long. I really wish I could, because this was just only the beginning, and it eventually just gets worse and worse and worse, almost to the point to where I eventually would not realize who I am anymore. Looking in the mirror, not realizing who I am, and then facing all the consequences that were to come. Stay tuned for part 4.